Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weekend Warrior Podcast. I'm Curt Sandoval, your host, with my friend, my pal, my colleague from Cedars-Sinai, Dr. Robert Klapper. How are you?
I'm great. Fun week. A lot of interesting surgeries we can get into. But let's start with your week. How was your week in Green Bay, Wisconsin?
There was, the first time I went to Lambeau Field, the Rams played there this weekend. Well, they showed up anyway. They didn't play very well, but That's a different story. It reminds me, Dr. Klapper, of my high school cross-country coach when he said, "Do you know why you speak English? Because your parents spoke English. You know why you don't speak Japanese? Because your parents didn't speak Japanese." And I say that because when you go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we stayed in a little town called Appleton, 45 minutes away, and you realize you're on the bus and you just see these small brick homes in middle America, cold, and by and large, not painting with a broad brush, but by and large, a lot of overweight people because it's cold. They don't get the exercise. It's a dairy area. And I've never met anyone from Wisconsin that just was salt of the earth person, that wasn't the nicest person on the planet. But pulling into Lambeau Field, and it's right in the middle of a neighborhood, and nothing welcomes you to Lambeau Field like just people tailgating forever,
right?
And they're all telling you you're number one, but they're not using that finger. And it's awesome. The day I get tired of going to Lambeau Field is the day you go, "Curt, you got to try something else."
For me, it is the greatest story in modern sports history, which you should look up if you folks don't know this. But it's the only major sports team, football, baseball, hockey, where the owner is the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That's right.
And you will meet, when you go to games, sitting next to you on the shuttle or whatever, people whose great-grandfather, when they all got together and says, "We're going to invest a few dollars so that we own the team." And that is why they never have to worry that this small market team is going to up and leave. They ain't going anywhere.
It's astonishing, and people that have been to Green Bay know this, but if you haven't, and I think that would probably be a higher percentage of our audience, the couple of things when we say it's in the middle of a city, neighborhood. Absolutely across the street, whoever owned that house has gutted it and has turned it into a VRBO, and across the other side is this little area called Titletown that has a couple of bars and has just made it. But when you're in that area, you really realize that those 8 games on Sunday, that's what fuels the city economically. And there's a pub that when I was in the press box, I took a picture of it. And this is and I'm not exaggerating, 3 hours before kickoff. That pub, it's 50 degrees. It's standing room only on that patio out there.
Wow.
And I sent a picture, and my sister, who lives in Denver, texted me in the middle of the game. She's like, "Lambeau Field is benches?" Yes, it's benches. Yeah. You've been there.
I've been there. I think, apropos to your Appleton, Wisconsin, for me, the greatest person who ever grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, was Eric Weiss, better known as Harry Houdini, the greatest magician of all time. And here in Los Angeles, he created that magician's castle.
Oh, the Magic Castle.
The Magic Castle.
Houdini created that.
He created the Magic Castle, but he's from Appleton, Wisconsin.
Well, there's a joke there that if I lived in Appleton, Wisconsin, I'd be trying to escape as well.
That's right.
What about your week? What was the best part of your week?
I had so many interesting surgeries, a lot of shoulder surgeries this week, shoulder replacements, all kinds of stuff. But the injury that was the most interesting was in a weekend warrior who, and I brought a model here to show, his shoulder, this bump here is called the coracoid, which is where part of the biceps tendon attaches, and it never has issues. But it's called the biceps for a reason, bi meaning 2, sep meaning head. The second head goes up through this groove here, the bicipital groove, and attaches to the 12 o'clock position of, if you think of the socket as a clock. And when it is causing trouble, it's pulling on a structure, the gasket called the labrum. Now, if it just goes and ruptures on its own, like John Elway and Brett Favre, who won Super Bowls with a completely torn long head of the biceps, you have full motion, full strength. It just looks like a Popeye deformity when you make a muscle.
Wow.
But you're still as strong. You can still do everything, including winning a Super Bowl. The problem is when it doesn't tear completely and it's fraying and it's pulling on the other structures abnormally. And so the surgery I did this week was to actually arthroscopically find the attachment which was fraying and cut it on purpose, take that end and fuse it into the bone.
Wow.
So you don't get a Popeye deformity. And instantaneously, I called the patient at home, it's outpatient, and said, "How do you feel?" And he said, "I actually have no pain." It's pretty
wow.
awesome.
So you can't say anything about this patient, but I would assume I would know how a John Elway or Brett Favre may have injured it in a football-related injury. I'd be terrified to know how I could rupture my bicep. Is it strength and conditioning? That's freaky to me, Dr. Klapper.
I actually know of an OBGYN doctor who knew his biceps was killing him right in the front, just painful. And doctors, not me, give you shots. They do all kinds of stuff for it. But this wise OBGYN went to the gym and intentionally started curling with 65-pound weights, which are impossible to lift.
Right.
And he intentionally ruptured his body, did his own surgery, no more pain.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's once again, you just got my jaw dropping. Speaking of jaw dropping injuries, Daniel Jones, the quarterback of the New York Football Giants here, had a torn ACL. ACL injuries are certainly nothing new, but he did it without contact, and that's a big debate. And when you look at, we talked about on an earlier podcast, I think our first one together, we talked about Odell Beckham in the Super Bowl, did a similar thing.
Correct.
What do you see as an orthopedic surgeon when someone tears their ACL and nobody touched them? What does that tell you?
So we use the fancy word, a non-contact injury, and if you look at the video, there is no one around him. He's just backing up and collapses to the ground. The majority of the ACL tears we now see in football are non-contact. It's not Adrian Peterson or Carson Wentz getting tackled. It's Daniel Jones type of an injury. So just to go back, 3 things give our knee stability. Okay. 1, you tighten your muscles, your quad, your hamstring, the muscles that surround our thigh and our knee joint, and they alone, rigid because they're firing, gives support. So muscle stability. 2nd, the geometry. Look at how the femur and the tibia fit ball and socket almost together.
Right.
That geometry of how they fit, they're not flat surfaces. They're concave, convex, and they meet each other. That gives stability. And the 3rd and final thing that gives stability are the ropes or the canvas-like structures. And there's 4 that surround the knee. Those are the ligaments. They give stability as well. The lateral collateral ligament on the little toe side of the knee, the medial collateral ligament on the big toe side, and 2 that live inside the knee that cross each other. Cruciate in Latin means cross, anterior means in front. But what I want to talk about today and do some Klapper vision is notice the hole inside the femur, this space.
That right here.
Right here where it lives.
Oh, okay, right here.
That is called the trochlea, okay? This is actually the trochlea. This is called the femoral notch. And I want you to appreciate the shape of it. So let's do our first Klapper vision, Eli, of a garage door.
Excuse me?
Exactly. So I want you to now, Curt Sandoval.
Can I just say for everybody out here, this is why we do the show. I'm entrenched in the knee. Now we've got a garage door.
So I want you to appreciate the geometric shape, and I'm going to tell you the space inside the femur, the femoral notch, is similar to this garage door. And today we don't have a little car. We have something better, which has 4 wheels, if you will, but a tiny toy that
Look at that, ladies.
Curt is now holding. So if you want to march that buffalo into this garage door, pretend it's your car, but here it's a buffalo.
So he's going this way.
Right. This rectangular shape has plenty of clearance for your car or this buffalo. The ceiling is high enough, and either wall is wide enough, so we have clearance, room for your car to pull in to a garage, and plenty of height from the ceiling.
Gotcha.
And I'm here to say that most of us have a femoral notch which has plenty of clearance for the ACL to move. Now, what if you were born not with a femoral notch that had the shape of the garage door with plenty of clearance for the buffalo, for the car as it pulls in, but you tried to pull your car or buffalo into a Native American, an A-frame, not a rectangular shape, but you're trying to pull this buffalo, which probably they did out on the plains.
Yeah, and I'm sure buffalo, that's a whole different other story, but right. So he's got to be more
There's no room.
Right.
There's no room. There's no clearance on the side or certainly the ceiling because it's an A-frame. You're certainly not driving your car as a garage shaped as an A-frame because you would hit the walls. Would hit the ceiling. It wouldn't fit. Well, a large portion of the population, especially women, because there's 5 times more ACL injuries in women than men, they actually, look at my fingers, the shape of the femoral notch is an A-frame. And so when they make a turn, no one touches them, that A-frame snaps the ligament because there's no clearance. And when we see patients, which I do all the time, who've torn their ACL and no one touched them, you can see that A-frame. And one of the most important things you can do so you don't have a failure, which we see in the NFL all the time, person had their ACL fixed and now it fails again, you really need to make sure as the surgeon that if you see someone with an A-frame notch, yes, you're going to fix their ligament, however you're going to use a graft or whatever you're going to do, but as a sculptor in marble, for me, the joy I get is I will use tools to actually create a rectangular garage shape and not leave them with the A-frame.
So a couple of questions. First one is, why would women have a 5 times higher tearing their ACL?
This is a fantastic topic, and since Title IX, which we owe to Billie Jean King and all of those trailblazers to say, hey, you're spending all this money on the boys in college, you need to spend it on the girls.
Right.
Field hockey, soccer, look at what's happened with women's soccer, which has been fantastic to see. But as an orthopedic surgeon, now that we have more girls running on the soccer field, we see more ACL tears. Why is that? Hormonal differences, time of the month, yeah, there are some papers that show association. But in my opinion, the biggest reason is women's pelvises, so they can have babies are wider. So I'm exaggerating, but if the pelvis is wider, but your knees are still in the same spot, then when you jump, run, because the vector of your pelvis is higher, more stress goes to snap your knee.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I wish you would have been my geometry teacher and just explained it that way. I probably would have. Okay, so second question is, so let's go back to Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones, if you saw the highlights, if you didn't see the highlights, he wasn't touched, he's backing up. So is that telling you that guys that happens, is it because they have a teepee form, or is it because their foot is getting caught in the artificial turf and creating a twist?
Of the many causes for no one touched me, I tore my ACL, the A-frame is one. The turf may be another. Artificial versus natural turf, a whole other story.
Yeah.
But the real reason, in my opinion, is, and when I interviewed Tony Gonzalez on my radio show on ESPN, 17 years in the NFL, he missed 1 game. And how do you stay so healthy? That's the question I love asking athletes that I get to interview. What was your injury? Because everybody's been injured. If you do professional sports, you're getting injured. How did you stay so injury-free, Tony Gonzalez? And his answer was, Dr. Klapper, When football was over, I played beach volleyball. I played basketball. He continued, and Michael Thompson, who I love to death, he also will be the first to tell you how much he cross-trained. Because if you play the same sport and treat the muscle with the same stresses, you don't get the benefit. And the whole idea of playing one sport, unfortunately, in my opinion, comes financially. Because if you have a young kid who's great as a junior high school student, he goes to high school, that coach wants him to play that same sport. And in order to get the college scholarship, you got to play that same sport. But I will tell you, one of the greatest things we now do to try to prevent ACL tears is to bring the idea of how to land properly with your hamstrings and quads from a jump. But you learn all that when you maintain multiple sports in your life.
So that, to me, is overuse injuries. And I remember back when Pete Carroll was still coaching at USC and Phil Jackson was coaching at UCLA, and at the same time, Rick Neuheisel, Phil Jackson was coaching the Lakers, Rick Neuheisel was coaching at UCLA. And for ABC, I did a story on when should an athlete play just one sport. And all three of them said not till college, not till college. That is almost impossible in today's pressure-packed world of NFL, baseball, you know, all these things. And it's really education. It's education to the parents to realize that when they're not in football season, go play basketball. Don't just go strengthen your quad for more hits in football. Eli, can we put up Cam Akers? So Cam Akers also injured his Achilles. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. But these, when you see injuries like this, how much in your mind as an orthopedic surgeon is it turf versus a hit?
The correct answer is it is a combination of all of them. And you have to do the math. And he'd be a perfect person to ask because in 2021, he tore his other Achilles tendon.
That's right.
Cam, we should look this up. Was it on natural turf or was it on grass? Fred Dreyer, who I love to death, and I've had him many times to interview, is adamant that artificial turf just absolutely creates injuries. The players feel that way, but the injuries you're getting, the anatomy makes a difference. The cross-training makes a difference. These things are all variables that add to the pot.
And especially because Cam used to be with the Rams, I know he is a physical specimen. So you're not looking at a guy going, oh, his body's going to break down any second.
Right.
Just the opposite.
Right.
But I will say this. An executive with the Rams, I had this discussion with him on the sidelines during training camp. And it's a very hot topic, and understandably so. When people say, oh, they should just replace the SoFi Stadium turf with grass, the one thing that the average Joe fan, in my opinion, is missing is these are businesses. And it's economically, it would be impossible. Just take that one stadium to say, hey, we'll put grass in there. Okay, Arizona did it by having that tractor system that brings it out into the sunshine to feed it. You can't do that. You cannot do that at 9 out of 10 stadiums. The infrastructure would be just astronomically expensive. And what happens when Taylor Swift wants to have a concert, and the grass is all torn up and you're spending more money? The NFL is a business, and the business of the NFL team is, for most stadiums, New York and SoFi Stadium host two teams, the Chargers and the Rams, the Jets and the Giants. But most of them host one, so they need to make other revenue doing other things. And that might stink to the NFL Players Association, but it's reality.
I want to ask you a question and pick your brain. Fran Tarkenton, going way back to the players who built the NFL and the kind of injuries that they had, the collisions that they had. What is Curt Sandoval's opinion about preseason and not playing players to ramp them up, if you will, or is it putting them at risk for injury? What's your take on what to do with the preseason?
obvious take would be to make it one game, one. And I'll tell you why, because going back to the business side of it, players don't get paid in the preseason. Their contract is from start to the end of the regular season. So that's number one. Number two, you know who does get paid in the preseason? The owners of the stadiums. They make great revenue during that. If it was just about football, I would say get rid of it. It's almost like, and when you said Fran Tarkington, it reminds me of what the Los Angeles Clippers go through with load management. And with Kawhi Leonard winning an NBA championship in Toronto with load management, it was Jerry West who told him, you just ruined the NBA. Yeah. Because now everyone's going to do load management. And load management has its benefits, but it also has its negatives, that you're not strengthening the muscle. And when you said that, I'll tell you the other thing. This was way back at the beginning of my career. I'm in my late 50s. And when I was in my early 20s, I did a story at the old Texas Stadium in Dallas. And it was the first time I went on the field, and I was like, I just got to touch the star. Got to touch the star. Dr. Klapper, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I am not exaggerating. Where that star was in that thin piece of AstroTurf, when you hear these Fred Dryers say it was like playing in a parking lot, I was like, I can't imagine being tackled on this. It literally felt like the parking lot here at College of the Canyons on a hot day may have been a little softer.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and that's what causes so many injuries. But it's a freak game. It's overuse injuries. It's timing. It's a lot of variables. Yeah. As a friend of mine said, hey, a stinky onion has a lot of layers to it. So it's not just one thing.
And the anatomy is the anatomy, and it's important as a surgeon to see if you can go after what may have caused the injury as just one of the variables.
The other epidemic, we've been talking about ACL injuries, is the Achilles tendon, and we saw it with Aaron Rodgers. We've talked a little bit about that. We're going to talk more about that because it happened again to this man, Cam Akers. Coming up next on the Weekend Warrior podcast, I'm Curt Sandoval with Dr. Robert Klapper. Welcome to the Weekend Warrior podcast. I'm your host, Curt Sandoval, along with Dr. Robert Klapper. Man,
love it.
I've been, let me just say out of the gate, a week ago we're talking about Matthew Stafford's thumb. Yes. And I got to tip my cap to you, because I have the privilege of going back, and we aired a little bit of that on ABC 7, and I get to listen to what you say 3 or 4 times. And one of the things you said when we were comparing his thumb to a windshield wiper, and you said, if it's not broken, and it wasn't, and you said that bolt at the bottom would be loose, and you said, so he'll put it in a splint, let the swelling go down, he'll be fine in a couple of weeks. I'm like, he's not playing. And I'm in Green Bay, and I see, and no one knows yet if he's playing. And I'm like, it's in a splint. He goes to get on the bus. And when you travel with a team, you have to, whatever bag you carry, you have to put it down for the dog sniffing dogs. And he's not carrying it on his right hand. And I'm talking to another buddy of mine, and I'm like looking at Stafford's thumb. I'm like, he ain't playing. Dr. Klapper told me this. And sure enough, he didn't play. So, attaboy, you nailed that one.
Yep, and they're going to benefit from the bye week, and then he should be just fine.
I will say, this is more of our show is about you, the Weekend Warrior, and taking sports injuries and trying to teach you some of the anatomy of why players miss and why you might miss. What was your quote that you said about every person in this room
is either pre-op or post-op? Sooner or later, you will need an orthopedic surgeon.
Well, and so when you think about that, and you think about, the benefits of time off, it's just I just love your theory on that. That's just,
when I go to weddings and bar mitzvahs with my wife, we'll sit at our table, and I'll look at the other tables, and I'll say, and my wife's rolling her eyes going, I did his shoulder and his hip replacement. And like, I've operated on the whole wedding.
You know, and I got to compliment you on that, because every time I post something, I get 5 or 6 messages on the various platforms saying, oh, he did my knee. Oh, he did my shoulder. Oh, tell him I said hello. You know?
I was doing the consulting for the TV show ER when it was at its height.
Really?
And did a lot of work with them because they wanted to be absolutely legit. So they did this one episode called Prom Night. It was a big motor vehicle accident, and it was all orthopedics. So, Dr. Klapper, we need to have all the external fixators and the anatomy. We want it to be all great. No problem. I brought, like I'm going to do right now with the Achilles tendon. So I brought all the toys, and they said, it's last minute. Can you come to wherever it is in Burbank, the studio? So sure, I go, I drive in after work, and I have the set. They bring me onto the parking lot. I go into the set. As soon as the door opens to the airplane hangar set, as I walk in, the lighting person, hi, Dr. Klapper, you did my shoulder.
Oh, my God.
Then I walk to the person holding the camera, hi, Dr. Klapper, you did my ankle, you did my knee. And the director's going, who the hell is this guy? He operated on these. And then he looks at me and he says, you know, Dr. Klapper, I'd like to put you in this episode.
Did he really?
Yeah. So I said, well, I'm not an actor. You know, he said, oh, that's okay. What would you like to be, an orderly or an anesthesiologist? I said, well, if I'm an anesthesiologist, I'll be wearing a mask. No one will see it's me. You're right. You'll be an orderly. So it was hilarious because they have the cameras mounted on the stomach, right, that moves around. So I'm escorting the patient to recovery room, right? And there I am. I've never been on a TV show before. And I'm holding it, and there's the guy with the camera. So I keep, cut, Dr. Klapper, stop looking in the camera.
and you said, I told you I'm not an actor.
Right. The biggest laugh I got was, well, okay, so they did the scene, and I said, okay, thanks, I'm gonna, no, you're not leaving. We have to keep doing this scene. I said, how many times are you gonna keep doing this? Till it's right. At like an hour, the same scene over and over. And I'm saying to myself, you gotta be, but you know what? In fairness to Hollywood, and I don't know from nothing, but they kept doing this scene over and over again. And you could feel all of a sudden, all of it popped at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's when the director goes, cut, wrap. And like you can
That's
tell
amazing.
that it was the right thing.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
It's almost like an energy that you feel.
Yes.
It's the right thing.
Like this show that we're doing.
Amen. I'll amen on that one. Hey, Cam Akers used to live in the Hollywood area playing for the Rams. Now he's playing for the Minnesota Vikings. And he took a major step back in his career when he ruptured his Achilles and got beat out for the job. They traded him to the Vikings, and unfortunately happened again.
On the other ankle.
So, you know, the old, leg bone is connected to we all know the song. That has always resonated with me when you first told me about Anthony Davis's first injury 5 years ago.
Right.
Are those related?
So, yes, and let's talk about why right now, with Aaron Rodgers leading the way, just like Adrian Peterson led the way with ACL, in the past we learned so much from NASA and the military in terms of advancing what we do in medicine. Now, the NFL and baseball, the sports teams, the world you live in, Curt Sandoval, is really at the forefront of what we can now do to the weekend warrior, because we learn what we can get away with. So let's go to the Achilles tendon, and we can talk about the cleats, the turf, the side, whether it's the dominant leg or not, how you were tackled, all the different variables. But one thing that doesn't change is the anatomy. Mm-hmm. So here's the Achilles tendon. The muscle bellies up above, called the gastroc, that attach above the knee to the femur. The wider muscle, the soleus, you can see it here, attaches to the tibia, and they coalesce and form what's known as the Achilles tendon as it attaches to the calcaneus, or the heel bone. So in the case of Dominic Wilkins and all of the players in the past that we've operated on, the rupture occurred here. And when you take your scalpel as a surgeon and literally incise the rupture, because they can't move their foot up and down, you see strings and strands of this Achilles tendon that it literally looks like two ends of a mop. Okay?
Wow.
And our surgery was to figure out, we did spaghetti strands in a previous podcast, and how the locking stitch that we do to grab this so that we can bring these tendons together. This is how we have always fixed a torn tendon in the Achilles tendon case. What is brand new that we are now doing in the case of Aaron Rodgers, who's leading the way, and now we have Kirk Cousins and now Cam Akers and pretty much everybody else who's going to tear, because they're going to tear their Achilles tendon going forward. This is what's so fascinating about the breakthrough. What is the breakthrough? That instead of sewing the tendon, we are now, and I brought to our studio an actual speed bridge device that we use.
Really?
So that you can actually touch it and see it. But what is groundbreaking is we now use those locking stitches into the torn tendon, only instead of tying tendon to tendon, we do one extra step. We tie the tendon and implant it in the bone. So you can,
in the heel.
In the heel itself, in the bone itself. So that is why you saw 2 weeks after his Achilles tendon surgery, Aaron Rodgers walking without a boot.
Yeah, yeah.
That's because the stability you get from locking it back into the bone. So here, Curt, so the Klapper vision is, go back to the mop, please. So instead of repairing here, we are locking the stitch and locking it into the broom handle, that base, that metal or wooden structure that holds the mop. And so here, I brought, I guess I'll hold it.
Okay.
Actually, I'm gonna have you hold it.
Okay.
You need 2 hands for this. So there's the ankle. And literally, I am drilling 2 holes into the back of the heel bone, the calcaneus, driving this metal rod, which has on the end of it these bulletproof material stitches called fiber wire. And you see the threads here?
Yeah.
I will bang this with the appropriate size drill hole, this device, seating it all the way to the green belly.
Oh, are you kidding me?
And I'm turning these threads, and it's locking these stitches deep inside the bone. So now I have stitches locked into the bone, and then I will use those stitches to come up the strands and repair. That is called a speed bridge, and that is why the revolution is on. And it's so exciting to not just fix the tendon rupture, but to go to the next level of giving it stability immediately.
Hey, Eli, producer Eli, I want to tell Eli, hey, go back to the mop, but I'm not going to, because I just would love him to mop the floor once in a while in here. Can we, Eli, instead go to Cam Akers again? So one of the things is, if you aren't familiar, Cam Akers, several years ago, after his rookie season, start of his second season, he ruptures the Achilles on the right side, correct?
Yes.
And then now it's on the left. So what I felt, and this is just, I don't have anything to prove it, but he was so explosive to the hole.
Right.
And he just wasn't. And you can go back and read some of the quotes from Sean McVay. Cam needs to, Cam needs to, Cam needs to. And you know where I think the problem was? Right here in his head.
Right.
That he's going to re-injure that Achilles. And I only bring that up because now you're showing this incredible procedure, and it's like a revolution. It's just incredible. And I can't help but wonder, is Cam going to learn from Aaron Rodgers?
They all are. They all learn from Kobe by going to Germany.
Right.
They all learn from Adrian Peterson. We all learn from Tommy John. Sandy Koufax did not have the benefit of Tommy John because he blew out his elbow in the 60s, and it wasn't until 1974 that Frank Jobe, doing hand surgery with Herb Stark for people with polio, drilling holes and rerouting tendons to make up for the loss of the musculature in polio cases, that planted a seed in Frank Jobe's head. Maybe I can make a tunnel and make a new ligament for a baseball pitcher. It came from polio surgery. And I will tell you, where does the idea come from reattaching the tendon to the bone?
To the heel, yeah.
Here's the answer. When you tear your rotator cuff, which we treat all the time, we don't tie stitches tendon to tendon. We always drill holes in the bone and reattach it. So it's this ability to see what works in one part of the body for a surgeon and now bring it to another one.
So in one of our last podcasts, you asked me about a comparison with Fran Tarkington in the old days compared to the new days. So I want to kind of flip that from what you see as an orthopedic surgeon, and not just in pro athletes, but the weekend warrior. We are in a sports science and technology revolution.
We are.
Just incredible what is happening, and things through Google, through Apple that we can track and monitor. It's astonishing. Now, having said that, what that is doing long term, it's producing athletes, even a weekend warrior athlete out here, who's bigger, who's faster, who's stronger.
Yes.
How much of that, you've always said, no matter what skin color, what nationality, the anatomy is the anatomy. How much of building these bigger, faster, stronger athletes is the body not in any way not able to keep up with when an athlete builds the body bigger than what the frame can hold?
First, my wife says I never answer the question, so I'm going to try and answer the question by saying, think of Nelson Doubleday and the men who invented the game of baseball.
Right.
150 years ago. How far is first base from home plate?
90 feet.
Right. How far is the pitcher's mound from home plate?
60 feet, 6 inches.
Right. So I appreciate bigger, stronger, faster. And I appreciate the height of the basket is still 10 feet.
Right.
And that the football field is still 100 yards. And everybody wants to change those, which makes, the skin on your back crawl, because you want to be able to think of Jesse Owens as the same as Carl Lewis. You want to be able to connect the generations. The wooden bat that Babe Ruth used is no different now. You want to keep all that. So what I would say is bigger, stronger, faster. Isn't baseball just as exciting? How did they luck into that distance that it
amazing.
Doesn't make a difference in 2023 from 18 whatever when they started this?
It's amazing.
So to some extent, yes, bigger, stronger, faster. For sure, the natural turf versus artificial turf, a fabulous debate to have, and I can only go by players like Fred Dreyer who say it absolutely makes. You got to at some point believe the players in that regard.
Yep.
But I get the changes, but I'm here to tell you, I'm not so sure. The anatomy itself, structurally, we don't make stronger bones in athletes now. We don't make stronger tendons in athletes. We can make muscles strong that overpower the tendons, perhaps.
Right.
But I think that we should not get over our skis, no pun intended, because that leads to ACL injuries too. But we should.
It keeps you in business.
Right. We should stay in our lane and really spend a lot of time upgrading the procedures we do, which is what I'm showing you with the speed bridge, but also upgrading prevention, teaching young girls, because they're 5 times more chance of them with their high school soccer to tear their ACL in skeletally immature kids, but to teach them how to jump and land from a jump properly, to strengthen their hamstrings and quads so they behave symmetrically when they land from a jump. You should see the data of how many ACLs we're preventing now because of this training. It's huge.
And that's the key is in some regards you don't know what you're preventing because it was prevented.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
It's interesting as you were explaining all that. One of the things that popped into my brain is Dr. Tom House, who he caught Hank Aaron's historic home run for the Atlanta Braves in the bullpen. And he is now a baseball he works for he was part of what was called RBI program, Research Baseball Institute. And he was the one that taught me. My son is 21, and back in the day when my son was 8, 10 years old, he said, you ever have a pitching coach tell you, put the arm out and pull it into the chest when you throw? And he's like, I said, yeah, that's how he was taught. He goes, yeah, it's wrong. I said, really? And what had happened over time is three-dimensional imagery. And a typical camera shoots 30 frames a second. But now they have these cameras that can go in a complete circle around an athlete that shoot 2,000 frames a second. And if there's 7 cameras around a Randy Johnson, they break down through software and computers in this technology age, and it's not the hand to the chest, it's the chest to the hand. And just that change in the brain, and that to me is, when you explain, tying that together to this, when you explain that, first of all, note to self, don't rupture the Achilles, because I can come back, but I don't want to wake up that next day wondering why my heel hurts so much, because you stuck this thing in all the way. I mean, but what it's doing to the athlete mentally and emotionally that's difficult to measure is astonishing to me.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the cameras. So when we take x-rays, we have a front view, a side view, and usually a third view, an oblique view. And that's how we have to make a diagnosis. But when you have 360, the cameras you're talking, that's what a CAT scan is.
Yeah, you mentioned that. And you used a car blind spot.
Correct.
That's incredible.
So, yeah, I think it's interesting, because if we had an airline pilot in the room right now, he or she would explain how they now use a 360 to improve their landing and takeoff. If we had someone who is in construction, how they make the 72nd floor, they now use the laser to see if it's level from a 3. I mean, it's just great to recognize the connecting the dots in every aspect of life. And that's why we need to talk to each other, because you don't need to have a breakthrough discovery and keep it in a room by yourself. Believe it or not, that would be relevant for a whole different field.
So that's how I want to finish this segment. AI is exploding across the world. But in what you do with surgeries for weekend warriors, surgeries for actors and actresses and athletes, in the past decade, just 10 years, what has changed the most for you through science and technology that's helped make you a better surgeon?
Being able to do more and more through smaller and smaller incisions. Using the technology that Eli's using, cameras and fiber optics. I saw a patient recently, he was so glad to see me. 30 years ago, his shoulder dislocated. He was now seeing me because he now needed his knee replaced. But he looked at Dr. Klapper, my shoulder, I never had a problem. I surf, I do everything. And I'm looking at this incision that I made 30 years ago where I cut through perfectly good tissues, because what we did, you were taught, you made a big incision and to move the anatomy around so that I could get into the ball and socket joint. 2.5 hour surgery. It's called a T-capsular shift. I did so many of them, and everybody did great. Now, you come to me, you dislocate your shoulder, I'm not kidding, 15, 20 minutes.
Wow.
Puncture wound in the back, you see where the labrum's torn, you go home, boom.
Well, you said that at the beginning of the show about a surgery you did, and it was outpatient. I'm like, that's outpatient? That's incredible.
And then you call the guy that night, how you doing at home? I don't have any pain. It's amazing.
All right, I said last thing, I lied. So in one of the segments, and this is for all the weekend warriors out there. So I've been doing stuff with you for 5 years or so, and one of my favorite things that you've taught me is how it's connected. And I know it's connected, but now knowing it and doing things to help it. So I'm traveling, I've traveled the last 2 weeks, so I'm on a flight, and inflammation happens on a flight. And I had been last week hiking a little bit more than normal, and in my head you had told a viewer about his back was hurting, and you're like, okay, the hike is the payoff. Did you get into the gym and elliptical and stretch? And I'm like, okay, I did too many payoffs. I did too much hiking. So all that to say, I'm in the hotel in Green Bay and in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I go to walk down. I'm going to go walk down to the gym. And I'm like, why is my right knee hurting? And I'm like, my left knee has always been the problem. And I'm like, my right knee. And I've got Dr. Klapper in my head, you guys. And it's like, it's all connected. And I'm like, you know what it is? And I don't know what it was. It was just aching, and I'm like almost limping, walking down the hall. I'm like, I didn't do anything other than flight. And you know what it was? I just stretched out my calf muscles. And where that calf muscle goes up to the back of the knee. All I did was 10 minutes of stretching. I'm like, I'm good.
Awesome. Be holistic. Stay away from pills and shots. Surgery's great. That's what I do for a living. But it makes me happier to meet someone who's avoided surgery by changing their routine. That's why I write these books, Heal Your Hips, Heal Your Knees. Plenty of people for me to operate on, but it really gives me a great joy when people go, who cares what the x-ray looks like? Yeah. It doesn't hurt. Blisters hurt. They become a callus. They don't hurt anymore.
Well, it gives us great joy to talk to you every week and put a couple of segments together. You make us a better person.
Well, God bless you.
Right back at you, folks. God bless you, and we hope you have a great week. Until next time for the Weekend Warrior Show, I'm Curt Sandoval with Dr. Robert Klapper from Cedar-Sinai. Have a great week, everybody.